Hello, welcome to this episode of Africa This Month on Ominira TV. Hi, I'm Lanre Peter. Africa This Month is a program where we discuss and analyze selected issues of happening across the continent every month. With me in the studio today, I have a regular analyst on this program and an African Liberty Fellow, Bayo Fesobi. Bayo, thanks for joining me again.
It's my pleasure, Lanre. Thank you very much for inviting me.
My pleasure too. Without further ado, Bayo, last month, one of the stories that we looked at was the military situation going on in Mali. And the update to that story this month is that the parliament has approved a new charter to allow the interim government to stay in power for another 5 years.
Interesting.
Interesting, as you said. Remember, just to give a little background, remember that the military coup, the current interim president, Colonel Goita, staged a military coup in 2020 that hoisted Boubacar Keita.
Yes.
After then, he proposed that he was going to conduct elections in February 2022, but in December last year, he proposed again that the government should allow him stay in power, for 5 years. And in opposition to that, the Economic Community of West African States laid a trade embargo on the country, closed borders. But despite these sanctions from international bodies and ECOWAS, it seems as if Malians are in support of the regime, while definitely some are opposed to it. Now we've seen the parliament approve a democratic transition of 5 years. Bayo, what do you think? Do you think that Colonel Goita is having his way? And what particularly how would this affect democracy as a whole on the continent, and particularly the people of that country?
Thank you very much, Lanre, for that very interesting story. For me, it brings back to fore the fact that most African countries still battle with, efforts at making governance a little bit stable. For the parliament in Mali to have approved 5 years, seems as though that was going to be a legitimate stay for, Colonel Goita to stay in power for the next 5 years. But you ask me, how feasible is that? That's too much. If you ask me, that's pretty too much. Even elected presidents don't spend up to that. I mean, legitimately, you get 4 years. That's the max. Next, you have the next chance to get tested again. If you get another 4 years, why stay in power for 5 years?
Sorry to cut you short. There is a clause in the bill, though, and the clause is that the interim president would not be able to stand for election
after that 5 years.
But it's not. It didn't say Colonel Goita will not be able. It just said the interim president would not be able.
You see, my fears about all of this brings me back to where where all of this stemmed up from, and then back to the 1960s, where we had the first coups in Africa, and then within the space of 3-4 years, we had about 40 coups happening across West Africa, and currently we are back to that trend. Currently, the region is having the highest number of coups in the past 2 years. The last 5 years, we've had about 10 coups happening across the whole region, which is becoming alarming over the day. Now, why do we have military incursion in the first place? Why do we keep having, interruption in democratic transition? Why do we have to lobby and then fight for what is legitimate in the first place? It's because people know what is right. They know what to do. They just fail to do it. That's where all of this stems from. And, it still baffles me why we're going to have, 5 years, have a military man staying 5 years in power, and then we'll transit to, I think ECOWAS has stepped up on the game, and as at the time of this recording, this session, we should have a delegate to Mali to check in on why that should be. I hope they are able to prevail on them to, one, at least bring down the number of years, and then two, ensure that yes, some of those clauses which looks beautiful, but be the fact that there are longer years, say they still remain. So if we have reduced numbers of years and then we see to it, now there are targets, there are landmarks, there are timelines to achieve so many I mean, important things between that space of 5 years. Once we have breakdown, I mean, we should not allow people to lose focus in their transitioning. If this happens, then we may just be looking at another coup in another country in any moment from now.
From what you said, I agree with you, because see, this is becoming a trend, and it is. I believe it is bad for democracy.
Definitely,
especially because when almost every country in the world today has one or two challenges, and since we're just all recovering from a pandemic,
exactly.
You know, there's unemployment is high, inflation is rising, and things are happening in other countries. So, and most of the time, these military rulers or leaders give these are the reasons they give.
I mean, for their caution,
exactly, for staging coups. So I believe that this is not good for democracy, and I believe that but we'll keep watching to see France,
the outcome of the
exactly
delegates.
France and other European countries are also, you know, withdrawing their troops, and
looks cool.
You know, for a country that is facing insurgents, I hope that we'll keep watching to see what happens, and I hope that ECOWAS steps up to reinstall democracy in Mali. So let's move to the second story. This one is from East Africa, Kenya particularly, where some days ago Kenyans took to social media to express their displeasure about the high cost of living in that country, particularly driven by the spike in cost of basic commodities like food, electricity, and fuel. Fortunately or unfortunately, a similar thing also happened around the same period in Morocco, where thousands of people took to the streets to also protest against the high prices of fuel and commodities as well. And this is making me wonder. Of course, these are not just the countries that are battled with inflation. In Nigeria, inflation has been on the rise, with food inflation being the worst of it. What do you think could be the best recovery plan to help citizens cushion this effect of inflation?
Thank you very much, Lanre. As we were trying to relate the case of Kenya and Morocco, it brings back to me the unfortunate scene again in Nigeria. You know, the Kenyans were decrying the high cost of foodstuff, fuel. The same thing in Nigeria is happening at the moment. You know, the fuel, we started with the fuel now, and then we moved to transport. As also the cost of transportation has moved up. In little time, I'm sure this would, affect the food prices. Now, you recall that even the Kenyan government seems not to be, capable to control this situation. And that brings back to me why do we neglect the place of opportunities and alternatives? And when I mention alternatives, I mean plans, suggestions, templates that could work rather than this central planning game that we are running. How do I mean? There are all other areas the country can prosper rather than the conventional. Nigeria lost some of its, great assets when we started, looking towards the oil boom, which eventually, translated to our oil doom. So, one of the ways we could cushion the effect of this inflation, high cost of food prices in the market, is to look inwards, look at what the people need. Most of what we import could probably be locally produced, and then we could survive based on this in a long time.
Well said, Bayo. I think that one of the things that African nations also need to look at, given just recovering from this pandemic situation, is the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, which has to be. We need to fast track that.
But Lanre, sorry, if we don't build what we want to trade on, eventually you might have the abundance that I cannot exchange for. So each country needs to focus on comparative advantage. What do you have? What's locally accessible to you that you don't need to struggle, import or produce?
You're right.
Exactly. So if we don't focus on that, if Nigeria does not focus on cocoa, on cassava, on palm oil, on palm kernel, on cassava, on yam, on shea butter, these are locally produced raw materials that we could easily export. If we don't, at the end of the day, when the African Free Trade Agreement works and then is domesticated in all countries, we will not have what to trade with. It's just as though everybody is building money and you are not building yours. What will you have to buy when the market is open?
Yeah,
exactly.
You are right. Because one of the things that caused this high rise in inflation is because when we're importing much more from, I mean, using it devalues our local
markets.
And this is just one of the reasons that why we have inflation is on the rise, even though it's a global thing at this time, you know. But a good way for African nations to cushion this effect would be to fast track the Continental Trade Agreement, and to also take up policies that would, you know, bring in more investment.
Definitely.
And help to improve the economy. So we move away again from that and to the next one. This happened at the European Union and African Union Summit that recently happened in Brussels, where 6 African countries have been chosen to build vaccine production factories. This is as a part of the bid of the World Health Organization's bid to replicate the effective licensing of COVID-19 vaccines. It was said that, going by the World Health Organization's report, currently Africa produces about 1% of the coronavirus vaccines in the world. And according to the WHO figures, only 11% of African population has been vaccinated, compared to the global average of 50%. Just to, you know, say, I remember that in the thick of COVID-19 pandemic, there were concerns about vaccine equality, inequality, and
we even trashed it in one of our sessions.
Exactly, in one of the we talked about it, and you know, this issue of African nations asking for
permission, the licensing, you know, to produce this vaccine,
you know, transfer of the know-how.
Exactly.
Now we have it. This is what we were clamoring for.
Exactly.
About a year, months ago. Now we have it, and of course, it's a good thing.
Definitely.
But is this coming too late, given that the pandemic is already cooling off? What are your thoughts?
First, to of course applaud the fact that now we have more countries to collaborate to work on the production of more vaccines. It's a very, very interesting thing to learn that yes, we pushed, and then yes, we got what we wanted. But of course, no, it's not coming too late, Lanre. I feel that the world is preparing for more pandemics. And if we have this licensing, it gives us the you know, the landing, the soft landing, that yes, if we can produce this vaccine at this time, it gives us opportunity. We don't have to beg again. We don't have to literally, lobby for more licensing. That means, should there be any other pandemic, any other, any other breakout, we will be equipped enough. The production of this vaccine would mean that we would build new facilities, would build infrastructure that will help production of vaccines. Now, if we are not producing COVID-19 vaccines, there is the malaria vaccine that we will probably still produce eventually. How about the polio? How about the tuberculosis? Who knows? Another Ebola in the making, another virus in the corner that we will probably need to battle. So we are preparing for the years ahead. It's not just for now. Yes, the COVID-19 might be going off already, but of course, we will not shy away from the fact that the Omicron variant is still very much on ground. Nigeria is still battling with some of these cases. We still have growing numbers by the day, and we cannot, shy away from the fact that these numbers keep growing. People keep getting infected, and they need to be treated. And of course, even if the original mission of producing COVID-19 vaccine has been mitigated, we still need to look into how do we keep producing more vaccines to ensure that the level of those who have, the percentage of those who have been vaccinated goes up away from the 11% that we currently have.
Thank you for your submission. I agree that this is good for the continent, good for the global public health, and it's a good thing for Africans to be able to produce vaccines to, cushion the effect of future pandemics. We are going to our last story now, and this one is from Algeria. The country is planning to provide unemployment benefits for young adults between age 19 and 40. The president, Abdul Majid, says that the government will introduce unemployment benefits for young adults as the country struggles with an unemployment rate of almost 15%. The payment would be $100, and it is planned to begin in March. And the president said that it is aimed at preserving the dignity of young people. I mean, I like that statement, preserving the dignity of young people.
Interesting.
Of course, when I saw this news, my first concern is whether this is sustainable. However, I think that it's an uncommon thing to hear or see in Africa, but I'd like you to say something about it. What are your thoughts about, what do you think about Algeria's plan to introduce unemployment benefits for its young people?
First, I would like to applaud again the efforts of the Algerian government, because if you ask me, this is probably the first time an African country will be considering the masses, the young masses in this case. I mean, their interests are of priority to the government. That is a government that is interested in the future. Protection of the dignity of young people is not what the current government would benefit from. Definitely, it will transcend generations. And that's what we encourage governments to do. Build the capacity of your younger generation, so that in the forthcoming years, you have a reliable backbone to depend on. I mean, now you get $100, at least that would sustain you. You'll be able to afford your basic needs. You don't have to now go around abusing yourself. Well, concerning sustainability, which is also very key and important, it's important that we also help Algeria to realize if there are, blind spots they are not focusing on at the moment, which is a possible inflation, proliferation or proliferation of the database. Because if you have too many hungry people in a place, it is difficult to preach any idea. If poverty is, will definitely erode away the values that you uphold. And of course, like he said, bringing back the dignity will help, in a way, sustain the culture of hard work, the culture of, at a lot of times we get to ask ourselves this question: what does the country do for me? What do I get from the country? What does the country have to? What do I benefit from being a member of this country, being a citizen? Now Algerians have something to say for being an Algerian.
Yeah, thank you for that. I agree with you that this is commendable.
Definitely.
But the Algerian government should not just rely on stop at this, because when you create programs like this, as we said, countries of the world have such programs. In the UK, the US, Canada, these wealthy countries have this kind of programs. But the government should, beyond just giving benefits to unemployed people, I think the focus, after doing this, the focus should shift to how you can create more jobs, how you can lower the unemployment rate. That way, it is easier to sustain programs like this. Well, on that note, Bayo, I have to thank you again for joining me on Africa this month. It is always a pleasure having you here. And you too, it is always a pleasure having you on this program on Africa this month on Ominira TV. Thank you so much for joining us on this episode. Please share with your friends, and until next month, see you.